Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us. My name is María Majano. I'm the coordinator for communities of practice at the Let's Slack platform, and I'm the moderator of this event. This is the second of a series of webinars leading up to the workshop of the Global Climate Action Partnership, GCAP, which will take place in October and will focus on the alignment of the nationally determined contributions and the long-term strategies. This webinar is organized in collaboration with the Clean Energy Solutions Center and the Let's Slack regional platform. This time, we will discuss the connection between short-term and long-term planning, considering the case of Chile. Before introducing the agenda and our speakers, let me give the floor to Sophie Schrader for some indications about the use of the Zoom platform. Sophie, please. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'll make this super brief so that we can dive into the content of today. We are recording this webinar, and that recording will be shared with attendees alongside the presentation from today following the session. All attendees will be automatically muted throughout the webinar. However, we do strongly encourage you to use the chat feature to add comments and share inputs, as well as the Q&A function, which can be found in your toolbar to ask any questions that may come to mind throughout. We'll be sure to answer as many questions as possible, so we highly encourage engaging through that function. If you encounter any technical issues, please chat either myself, Sophie Schrader, or my colleague Holly Darrow, and we will do our best to assist you. You can also adjust your audio through the audio settings, and if you have any issues, you can dial in to listen by phone, and all of those details should be included in your registration email. We really encourage you to turn on the live closed captions in your preferred language, and this feature can be found if you select the 3 dots, which will show more options. And finally, at the end of this event, a survey will launch. We do review all of the responses to this survey to try to make future webinars the best that we can, and so we really do highly encourage you to submit your feedback. And with that, back to you.
Thank you very much, Sophie, for your help. And now, after those instructions, we move to an overview of today's agenda and an introduction to our speakers. We will start with a brief overview of GCAP and the Clean Energy Solutions Center, presented by Caroline Uriarte and Aaron M. Next, we will hear from Julianne Baker-Gallegos, country engagement specialist at the NDC partnership, who will make a presentation on the relationship between NDCs and LTS in climate planning, followed by a presentation from Andrés Pica Téllez, who is head of the Climate Change Division at the Ministry of Environment of Chile, who will share with us his country's approach to short and long-term climate planning. After the presentations, we will have a discussion segment based on questions from the participants before closing the session. Please, if you have questions for our speakers, write them in the space for Q&A that you will find on your control panel. Also, we encourage you, as many of you have already done, to use the chat to introduce yourself briefly and to let Holly or Sophie know if you have any problem. So now we thank you again for joining this session. We are planning to cover all this content in 1 hour. So we go directly to our first point of the agenda, an overview of GCAP and the Clean Energy Solutions Center. So please, Caroline, thank you, welcome, and we are ready to hear your presentation.
Thank you, Ana Maria, and thank you everyone for joining. I'll provide a brief overview of the Global Climate Action Partnership. The Global Climate Action Partnership, the short name we use these days is GCAP, but it used to be called the LEDS Global Partnership, the LEDS GP, and it was created back in 2011 when there was a need for establishment of a platform that enables peer-to-peer learning and collaboration across countries and practitioners working on climate change. So this network was created then and has grown over the years, and today we have over 4,500 climate leaders from around the world working on all topics from energy to agriculture, forestry, and other land use, transport, and finance issues, resource efficiency, and others. It's a very robust platform, multi-stakeholder, like I noted, and very rich discussions that takes place in communities of practice that I will briefly discuss in subsequent slides. So it's much about enabling the collaboration across countries, especially developing countries, on what's working, what's not working in terms of climate action, both on the design of NDCs and LTS, but also on implementation and financing. It is demand-driven. We work through regional platforms in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean. So we have 3 very robust and active regional platforms that engage with practitioners in those regions to understand what are the common topics that the region wants to address in the next year or next couple of years, and then design with the members a set of activities that address those priorities and those needs. And so it's very much demand-driven. The focus areas can change over the years based on demand, sorry, from the members. The mission, like I mentioned before, is to advance NDCs and long-term strategies and enable this collaboration across stakeholders and countries. And we do that through working on enabling policy and regulatory frameworks, also working on the replicability and scalability of projects, supporting project pipeline development and mobilization of investment and partnerships, and the capacity building element that's key to advancing LTS and NDCs. We have a partnership with the NDC partnership that we'll present shortly, but also with the UNDP and UNEP and many others, World Bank and many others. So we're very partnership driven as well. Next slide, please. This slide gives an overview of the topics that we are currently addressing in each of the regions. Like I mentioned before, it can change over the years, but these are currently the topics that are being addressed. So in Africa, we have community of practice on sustainable livestock management, rice methane, clean energy mini-grid, soil organic carbon, and then we have activities on carbon markets and long-term strategies, trainings, and technical assistance. We also, in Asia, we work on transport, electrification of the transport sector, and energy. We have a community of practice that's working on distributed energy resources, storage and green hydrogen, and climate finance. And the LEDS-like platform is working on electric mobility and sustainable logistic issues, as well as bioenergy, renewable energy storage solutions, as a partnership with the RELAC initiative, MRV and decarbonization plans, private sector engagement, and methane. We are guided by a global steering committee and a council of leaders that's composed of developing country practitioners, both from governments, but also from subnational, local governments, and other types of institutions like private sector and NGOs. And each of the regional platforms also have their own steering committee that guides the activities of the platform in coordination with the members themselves. We also offer technical assistance, no-cost technical assistance. So if you want to learn more about that, we're supporting countries on NDCs and LTS, both on the design and the implementation. You can contact us at the Secretariat at globalclimateactionpartnership.org or visit our websites. And the partnership is open and free for anybody to join. With that, I'll hand it off to Ana Maria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. And now we give the floor to Aaron for the presentation about the Clean Energy Solutions Center. Welcome, Aaron.
Thanks, Ana Maria. And hey, everyone, I'm Aaron with the U.S. Department of Energy. I want to also thank you all for joining today's webinar on aligning NDCs with long-term strategies. Can we go to the next slide? I'll try to keep this introduction brief so we can get to our very interesting presentations today. But as mentioned, today's webinar is brought to you in part by the Clean Energy Solutions Center in partnership with GCAP. The Clean Energy Solutions Center is an initiative of the Clean Energy Ministerial, which is itself a collaboration of 29 countries to rapidly increase the deployment of clean energy technologies globally. The Solutions Center is led by the governments of Australia and the United States, and it is operated by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, which supports both GCAP and the Solutions Center. The whole idea of the Clean Energy Solutions Center is to support developing governments with the capacity to design and adopt policies and programs to support the deployment of clean energy technologies. Next slide. We do that in 3 ways. The first is through our Ask an Expert service, and this service is available to any government that needs additional capacities to support a clean energy question or policy issue, and is available free of charge to developing countries. All you need to do is go to our website and apply to that to get that question answered. In the history of the Clean Energy Solutions Center, we've answered over 300 requests, and we hope to answer yours in the future. Another way that we support governments is through training and capacity building. We've done over 300 webinars like the one that we're co-hosting today, which are also available on our site as a resource for clean energy solutions around the world. And finally, our resource library not only includes our past webinars, but other reports, policy briefs, journal articles, etc., to help support the rapid deployment of clean energy technologies globally. Given that governments will be working on their NDCs this year and into next year, I am glad we can share best practices and lessons learned on webinars like today's. And if you find today's webinar helpful, I would encourage you all to leverage the resources mentioned today, such as reaching out to GCAP to support your climate ambitions through its regional platforms and tailored technical assistance, as well as the Clean Energy Ministerial's Clean Energy Solutions Center's Ask an Expert service to answer your clean energy questions. I hope you all enjoyed today's webinar, and I hope to see you all at future webinars. Now back to you, Ana Maria. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you to GCAP and the Clean Energy Solutions Center for the collaboration to organize this series of webinars. Now we go to the presentation by Julianne Baker-Gallegos, Country Engagement Specialist at the NDC Partnership on the relationship between NDCs and LTS in climate planning. Thank you, Julianne, for joining us today and for your presentation. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ana Maria, and thank you to the GCAP team for this space to discuss the role of NDCs 3.0 and LT-LEDs in climate planning. So maybe we can switch to the next slide. So as you know, the Paris Agreement calls for parties to assess progress towards achieving its long-term goals. This effort allows us all to take inventory, to identify gaps, and to work together towards effective climate solutions. The first global stocktake, which was released last year, was concluded at COP28 in Dubai. And it presented a critical turning point for us to take a long, hard look at the state of our planet, charting a better course for the future. The GST last year showed us that while significant collective progress has been made, we're still fairly off track to achieve the Paris Agreement goals. And there are 3 critical gaps that are highlighted. The first one is ambition. The second one is our ability to implement those NDCs. And the third one is finance. In order to address this, we need increased ambition in mitigation and adaptation action, and transformational as opposed to incremental change that allows systems to achieve net zero and climate resilience. We also need more and better finance for climate action, and we need more effective international cooperation that builds on credible initiatives to support this work. The global stocktake, I'm not quite there yet. Thank you. The global stocktake can serve as an opportunity for course correction that will allow us to ramp up climate ambition, accelerate collaboration, and act with the necessary urgency. Next slide, please. Nationally determined contributions and long-term strategies are key instruments for sustainable and resilient growth. When effectively aligned with existing national and sectoral development strategies, as well as priorities, these instruments can actually constitute a powerful starting point for translating countries' climate commitments into investment actions. To close the mitigation and adaptation gap identified by the GST, countries need to enhance their ambition in the short term through their NDCs and in the long term through their long-term strategies. And we also need partners to scale up their commitments to climate action to support these needs and deliver on the Paris Agreement. NDCs and LTLEDs need to acknowledge the intricate relationship between climate and development so that we can cultivate these strategies in a way that advance environmental sustainability while also advancing socioeconomic progress at the national level and ensuring resilience to climate change. NDCs and LTLEDs will collectively determine whether the world can get back on a global emissions trajectory that allows us to keep global temperature rises to 1.5 degrees. Next slide, please. Nationally determined contributions, which we are referring here to as NDCs 3.0, are countries' self-defined national climate pledges under the Paris Agreement. They form the basis for climate commitments, and they drive accelerated implementation of plans, policies, and strategies, helping unlock climate finance at scale. The Paris Agreement establishes a series of 5-year cycles that encourage increased ambition, including through NDCs that will constantly be enhanced. We have a series of requirements and encouragements for NDCs. There is a mandatory submission by early 2025 that encourages the progression beyond the party's current NDC so that it reflects highest possible ambition levels. We're encouraged to incorporate an end date of 2035 that considers economy-wide emissions reduction targets. We're encouraged to align those countries' long-term strategies with NDCs and with other national development strategies, and also to ensure that the information necessary facilitates clarity, transparency, and understanding. And we are encouraged to also outline how the preparation of that NDC has been informed by the outcomes of the GST, as well as how it will contribute towards the Paris Agreement goal. Next slide. NDCs need to recognize the importance that they play in strengthening implementation. They need to build on the previous iterations, what we call generations 1 and 2, or NDCs 1.0 and 2.0, and take into account the wider policy landscape and country priorities to ensure that those climate objectives that are being established are integrated into national development and planning activities. This slide that you see here illustrates how NDCs can fit in the broader context of domestic policy, legislation, and regulation. We highlight some of the key development and policy instruments and break them down according to the relevant stakeholders that engage with each of them. Rather than take up too much time discussing this slide, I will let you peruse it at a later stage. But the point that we're trying to make here is that ensuring climate ambition is based on or aligned to national priorities will accelerate the implementation of those climate targets. And ensuring that climate priorities are also integrated into wider planning ensures that countries avoid lock-in to unsustainable technologies or processes that may impair the development goals. Next slide, please. The concept of low-emission development strategies first emerged in 2008 in the lead-up to COP15 in Copenhagen. While the Copenhagen Accord recognizes that a low-emission development strategy is indispensable to sustainable development, it's not explicitly defined. So since then, we've had LEDs that have emerged in the form of national climate plans, green growth strategies, and other instruments that can help link countries' sustainable development objectives with their climate targets. Long-term strategies are national, subnational, or supranational long-term strategies for envisioning low-emission development, allowing countries to identify their national development priorities that are in line with a decarbonization pathway. They are typically voluntary strategies that guide governments as they consider climate mitigation in their national socioeconomic context, and they consider synergies and potential co-benefits that emerge that can help that country attain its national and economic and societal goals. They have a very clear focus on development, which also encourages the inclusion of climate change adaptation as a precondition for many of the countries in achieving their societal goals. They provide a roadmap for a transition to a low-carbon, climate-resilient economy, while also promoting social equity and economic growth. They typically aim for a net zero 2050 target, and according to the Paris Agreement, all countries should strive to formulate and communicate an LTLEDs to the UNFCCC that considers common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities in light of national circumstances. Next slide, please. Aligning NDCs and LTLEDs is important for 4 reasons. It ensures consistency and coherence in national development strategies. It enables the integration of national policies, and it contributes towards enhanced climate ambition while at the same time encouraging investment. Some strategies that countries might consider to promote NDC and LTLEDs alignment include the inclusion of long-term targets in the NDC, where, for instance, NDCs can serve as an interim milestone for long-term strategies. Aligning NDC and LTLEDs emission trajectories, ensuring that the burden is reduced for countries, and we're maximizing efficiency in the use of tools, modeling tools and approaches that are taken. And then aligning with a just transition to net zero ensures that the sustainability of this implementation by considering long-term development goals and how these strategies will fit into them. Aligning short-term actions with long-term goals also helps us address misalignment that can sometimes happen when we're more focused on the short term. And it also considers or addresses potential disruptions that can emerge when there's changes in administrations within government. Aligning stakeholder engagement activities and governance mechanisms ensures that there's cross-pollination happening between these two instruments so that there are common working groups that are in tune with needs both in the short term and long term. And then providing information on how that NDC is aligned with LTLEDs helps ensure that there's transparency in these processes. As countries set out to design implementable finance-ready NDCs that are aligned with LTLEDs, the NDC partnership stands ready to support. In fact, we're already supporting first movers. Next slide, please. For those of you unfamiliar with us, the NDC Partnership is a global coalition that was established to bring together developed and developing countries and institutions and deliver on ambitious climate actions to achieve the Paris Agreement. We were launched in COP22 in 2016, and we are founded on the idea that technical assistance, expertise, and financing is critical for climate action. Next slide, please. The partnership was built on the premise that acting together, we achieve more. We mobilize or align existing partner resources to support country needs. And in this manner, we have supported 92 countries, leveraging 186 partners and mobilizing an approximate amount of $1.7 billion in technical assistance. Next slide, please. The NDC Partnership's global call for NDCs 3.0 and LTLEDs was launched at COP27 in 2022 and runs until 2025. It facilitates access to dedicated resources and expertise so countries can align, update, and enhance their nationally determined contributions and their long-term low emissions development strategies in line with the Paris Agreement. To date, we have received requests for support from 53 countries through the global call. A total of 30 countries are seeking support for NDCs 3.0. And of these 30, 19 are also aiming to develop their own LTLEDs. So they've requested support for both. A total of 42 countries are seeking support for LT-LED's development, and 20% of these are focused on long-term visions and 80% on long-term strategies. We also have a number of countries that are working on developing the request through the global call. On this graph towards the right, you can see a breakdown of the requests that the global call team has received through our different country engagement mechanisms. We have on the left outlined the regional breakdown, where you can see that Asia Pacific and Eastern Europe, as well as Latin America and the Caribbean, are leading the charge in a lot of the requests that we have received. And on the right-hand side, you can see the breakdown according to whether these requests focus exclusively on NDCs, exclusively on long-term strategies, or both NDCs and long-term strategies. Up until about March this year, we had seen a strong focus on long-term strategy submission requests for support. And as of March, we've seen an uptick in countries wanting to work on their NDC requests. We are happy to report that a lot of these requests tend to aim for alignment. And so we expect that as momentum builds for NDC 3.0 submissions in 2025, we're going to see more and more of these requests coming through. Next slide, please. The global call has had strong engagement from partners, and we have an over 70% response rate, largely due to strong collaboration that we've established ahead of time with key partners such as UNDP and GIZ. We've also seen an increase in partner engagement and responses made to requests as new initiatives and organizations emerge that want to dedicate resources and support to NDC and LT-LED's development. Now, as demand is increasing, we are turning our attention to supply to ensure that partners are able to respond to the request for support and country needs are met in a timely and efficient way. Next slide, please. In the context of broader development goals, I think it's important to note that countries who've requested support from the partnership or have requests in the pipeline represent 13% of global emissions, yet almost 75% of these countries are listed as vulnerable or highly vulnerable. I'm going to go ahead and skip the examples because we have a really great one coming for Chile, and I'm sure they can speak to this in more detail. So next slide, please. Oh, the previous one, sorry. We have been, along with partners, UNFCCC and UNDP, monitoring what we know in terms of countries intending to submit. And we know that over 100 countries intend to submit NDCs 3.0. There is also a lot of uncertainty with about 80 plus countries that are still uncertain, or we are unaware of what their plans are and when they intend to submit their NDCs by. Among these, several are members of the G20. Of those who do intend to submit, more than 80 are members of the partnership. So there is potential for a fair amount of increase in demand for support that is likely to include an alignment of NDC submissions with long-term strategies as well. And because of this, next slide, please. We continue to identify new opportunities to support country needs. We've noticed there is no shortage of guidance out there when it comes to developing NDC materials and what development and raised ambition NDCs might look like, but it can also be challenging for countries and partners to navigate all the information out there. So together with the UNFCCC, with technical inputs from UNDP, WRI, and some 30 plus partners, we have developed what we're calling the NDC 3.0 Navigator. This is a dynamic online tool that provides clear and accessible information to support countries to deliver NDCs that are ambitious, fair and equitable, technically sound, and implementable. Next slide, please. The Navigator presents the content and importance of NDCs 3.0, including how countries may go about responding to the outcomes of the first GST in their national context. It helps countries to reflect on their current national circumstances, their ambitions, wider development goals, and helps them identify nationally appropriate opportunities for NDC enhancement. It also supports countries in exploring the most impactful opportunities and strategies that can help them raise their ambition and strengthen implementation. The tool builds on currently available support and resources. We're not trying to generate new information. And we do intend to make it a live resource so that as it's further developed, as new guidance is produced by partners and other key stakeholders, we can include it so that it's easily accessible for countries. This tool comes in to complement the partnership's global call by helping countries identify support needs and submitting high quality and comprehensive requests for NDC development that can be supported then by the partnership. Next slide, please. The NDC 3.0 Navigator presents 7 essential routes to ambitious and implementable NDCs. We have broken these routes down into 2 broader groups. The first one includes 3 focuses on ambition raising opportunities, which we like to refer to as the what. And it refers to aligning the Paris Agreement temperature or aligning NDCs to the Paris Agreement temperature goal, aligning them to the Paris Agreement global goal on adaptation, and delivering a just and equitable transition. The following 4 routes that help ensure NDCs are implementable is what we're referring to as the how. These include mobilizing all of government and all of society, identifying support needs, basing the work on technically sound and transparent documents, and unlocking finance. As an example, I've pulled up some screenshots here from the Align to the Paris Agreement temperature goal. As you can see, the tool is structured in a way that's very customized so that if you're a country or a partner developing an NDC and seeking to align it to the Paris Agreement temperature goal, you can leverage these guiding questions, including some elements related to, for instance, long-term strategies, and then read more about why this matters and how you might go about it. We also provide further resources that can be leveraged that have been developed by multiple partners so that we can have a science-driven and informed approach to NDC development. Next slide, please. For more details on the Navigator or the work that we are conducting from the NDC partnership, please do visit any of the channels that you see here on the slide. For now, I will leave it here. Thank you all for your attention, and I look forward to discussing any questions or comments that arise during the Q&A.
Thank you, Julianne, for sharing these tools that I'm sure, well, they are already raising many questions from the participants, and I'm sure they are going to be very useful in this process for the update of the NDCs. Remember, if you have questions for Julianne, you can write them in the Q&A section, and we are going to try to answer them. Either she will write answers or we will have a space for discussion after the next presentation. Now, I would like to welcome Andrés Pica Téllez. He is head of the Climate Change Office at the Ministry of Environment of Chile. I would like to say also that the Office of Climate Change at the Ministry of Environment of Chile is one of the first members of the Let's LAC platform, the regional platform for Latin America and the Caribbean of the Global Climate Action Partnership, and also members of our steering committee. We always have received a lot of collaboration of Chile, sharing their experience, and this is not the exception. So thank you very much, Andrés, for participating in the webinar, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I will try to share the experience that we have in Chile, trying to connect long-term with short-term strategies. So if we can move to the next slide, I'm going to talk about the history of how we started doing this connection between long and short-term studies in Chile. Talk about the institutional and legal context that we have developed here, the climate change management instruments that we have in place in Chile, and also how we are doing our climate planning, and what are the progress that we have made so far, and what are the current challenges that we are facing. So, when Chile was preparing for update their NDC in 2019, the president decided to do it in a very ambitious way, because we wanted to develop that with the best knowledge and in the best way possible. So we put together a scientific committee to help the development of this. And to do that, they made a call of hundreds of scientists from different fields to support and develop guidance of how the NDC should be made. That was also supported with the, another table with the private sector and NGOs and other actors that were studying and that were giving advice on how to develop this NDC. This process developed an NDC that was connected with science and the requirements of science, and also a lot of social goals were set there, and also ended up with a long-term vision. So it is not enough to plan for 2030. We have to plan for a long term, and at the time, it was important to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. So we also started to develop this long-term strategy in the same process, and also raise the need to develop a climate change legal framework that will be sufficient to address all these challenges. And it was very clear that every action at government level has to have a climate lens. With that, we move to the next slide, and we developed this NDC. This NDC developed a plan to achieve carbon neutrality to 2050, and develop also a mitigation goal by 2030, like every other country, but also set a carbon budget. That is quite innovative because Chile, in our NDC, we are not just forced to fulfill a goal for 2030. We have a carbon budget between 2020 and 2030. So we have to be working in climate change every year, because if we are moving slow the first year, we have to produce more emissions in 2030 or 2029. So it's very challenging, and that was one of the things that were required by science. It's not enough to have a goal in the long term. We have to have a midterm strategy and also short-term goals. Moving to the next one. So with that input, in 2022, we developed the climate change law. This climate change law is a framework that is not just an environmental thing, and it really make a difference, because we said that every action at the government level has to have a climate lens. So it's more a whole government approach, and this law is very ambitious. So this law sets objectives in the law that we want to achieve carbon neutrality before 2050, and also we need to work in resiliency. And also sets a very tight connection about the NDCs. Like the NDCs has to be developed in a certain way, because it has to be developed in a good way to be sufficient to fulfill the standards of the law. And that is what we are going to commit in the process that we have to develop now for 2025. Moving to the next one. So this is just an example of the things that are in the law. That the law sets a lot of elements. One of those is the principles. So every element of the law, every plan that is mentioned in the law, every guiding principle has to be connected with this. So we put a very holistic approach, set by science, like everything has to have a scientific element. It's not just about willingness, you have to have a robustness there, but also we have to do things in the right way. We have to care about other environmental elements. It's not just about reducing emissions. And also it's important to develop this with the sense of urgency that is related with climate change, but also connected with the public. Like it's not just a plan that is by the government. It's more like a state approach. Like climate change in Chile has to be addressed as a state issue, not just a thing that a government is pushing or not pushing in a specific moment. Moving to the next one. So this is like a summary of the climate change management instruments that are set in the law. Like the law talks very explicit, at least in the top, that we have to develop national determined contributions, and we have a specific process to develop those. But also we have to develop long-term strategies. Like those things are connected and are aligned. So every process has to look the other when they are being updated. They have different elements in there, but they have, for example, the time frame that they're working is different. That time is different, but we have a different, in the long-term side, we have to define the emissions budgets by sector. And also we have to set objectives at subnational level that have to be clear, and also targets for adaptation. Those elements are the keystone from our process, but then we have to implement those. So every element that is in our NDC or in our long-term study has to be the guideline to develop mitigation adaptation sectoral plans. This is achieved in many governments. The Ministry of Environment is the one mandated to develop all the mitigation plans. In Chile, we make this a government approach. So the different government ministries have to develop their own climate action plans. For example, we have by law mitigation action plans that have to be developed by different different ministries, and every one of these ministries have their own carbon budget. So they have to have a policy that is good enough to fulfill their carbon budget. Then we have the same for adaptation, and we have 12 adaptation sectoral plans that are also in charge of different ministries.
Andrés,
So, yeah.
may I interrupt you? I'm sorry, but we are having some problems hearing because when you move away from the microphone when you speak. So if you can speak directly into the microphone, so you have your headphones there. Can we check? Thank you. This is very interesting. It will, yes. Can you try again? Can you try?
Do you hear me well?
I think it's better. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for that. And then we have a layer at subnational level. We have to develop regional climate action plans that are a different political level of government, and we have to develop municipal climate action plans that are also a different political level of government. And in the side, also we are working in terms of developing strategic water resources plans for every basin in Chile. All these elements have to be connected and have to. Can we move back? Okay. Every one of these elements have to be connected between each other and has to be aligned by law, and have to develop a monitoring, reporting, and verification system that is aligned. So these elements, the Ministry of Environment is in charge of developing guidelines and providing information to help everyone to develop plans that are aligned. And for that, means of implementation strategies are important. We have to be sure that we develop a framework that enables the climate action plans to be financing, but also we develop all the capacity that is needed at every level of government to develop these plans and then implement them. Moving to the next one. With that context, in summary, in Chile, the main climate change management instruments are the NDC, the long-term climate strategy, but also we have to develop 7 mitigation plans by ministries, 12 adaptation plans by ministries. For every region of Chile, we have to develop a climate action plan, so there's 16 climate action plans at regional level and 345 climate action plans at municipal level. Plus, the more than 100 strategic plans for water resources. So the law is very ambitious, and all these things are happening very tight and very connected. If you see the next one, if you see the timelines here, like the long-term study, like after developing the NDC by 2020, we developed the long-term study in 2021. But now we have to update the long-term study in 2025 together with the NDC. The first one, the long-term study, looks at 30 years long-term period. So the next one has to go up to 2055 and has to be updated after this first update every 10 years. On the other hand, the NDCs have to be updated every 5 years by law. And the next one is going to be updated. We are starting the process just this month, so we have to develop the draft by the end of the year, and then we have to do public engagement for that, and then draft the final version by the mid of 2025 before the next call. And all that is going to be fed by all the mitigation adaptation plans and the regional climate action plans and the municipal climate action plans. So the subnational element of our new NDC is probably going to be very important because it's going to be fed by all these new elements. Moving to the next one. So this is just a summary in terms of the process. As you can see the periods of update for the NDCs and the long-term studies, and how these things are going to be connected and being fed one to the other, because the alignment between instruments is important in order to achieve a continuity, and also that is something that is going to be not about a political cycle. Like, we have to continue the work that the other government started in 2020. Now we have to continue the work, and the next government is going to give continuity to that, because every element has to be aligned because of the climate change. Moving to the next one. So in terms of governance, the system in the law is set in this way. Like, the president is the main person around the law, because every action or plan has to be signed by the president. But also, like I was saying, like, this is a government approach. There is a ministerial council for sustainability and climate change that has to approve every plan that is set at a national level. Like, if we are developing we just approved, like, last week, the adaptation plan for agriculture, and that was approved by all the ministries related. Like, for example, the Ministry of Housing had to approve that plan, the Ministry of Finance has to approve that plan. It's not just about the Ministry of Environment and the sectoral ministry that is developing that plan. On the other hand, the Ministry of Environment is in charge of supporting this process, helping all the other ministries in terms of the alignment. And for that, it has set interministerial team on climate change that is more at a public servant level. Like, all the officials that are inside of every ministerial team work together in terms of developing plans, because the plan of agriculture has actions that are related with other ministries, so they have to be talking together in order to collaborate in every plan. Also, like I was saying, it's important to get a state vision of that. For that, we have set also the scientific advisory committee is a guideline that reviews these plans, and also we have a national council for sustainability and climate change that includes the private sector, the workers, the NGOs, the academia, that work together in order to give advice in the development of every one of these plans. And that also, every plan has to have their own engagement process with the public. Also, sometimes even if we are working with more than 20 ministries, sometimes you need to connect with other agencies for specific actions. So also that process is considering this process. Moving to the next one. So up to this moment, the learnings that we have taken of connecting these short and long-term objectives for us has been useful, but also very challenging to have a climate change law, because it pushes us to coordinate better along different ministries and different levels of government. And that has been an important element to do that. We did that at voluntary level the first time, but now with the law, that is much more challenging. But we're working on that. The long-term climate objectives set by law also help us, because you know where you have to go with each one. It's not whatever you want. You have to be able to achieve some goals. And that puts pressure in order to start implementation soon. We have a well-defined climate change governance with specific actors and roles that help us in order to understand the obligation of each ministry. So, for example, if the Ministry of Defense has to develop the climate adaptation plans, they have that obligation by themselves. It's not something that the Ministry of Environment has to ask for them to develop. They are forced by law to do it. We have available periodic and official information to from decision making. So that's one of the processes that is more challenging in our hand in terms of being a Minister of Environment. We have to collect all this information, share it with the public, be sure that the different ministries are accessing that info, and also all these plans require more and new information, and that also is challenging because we really don't have everything that they need. And it's a continuous process in terms of developing new tools and new information. And we have a continued public and scientific advice to develop these policies and expand climate action. And that is very important, because this has to be a state issue, not just a thing that the Ministry of Environment is doing. Moving to the final one. So the current challenges that we face is that we need to strengthen our MRV systems. Like all the plants are being developed, they have to develop their own MRVs, but we have to review those and be sure that those are going to be working for the future. We have to consolidate the national system to access the information and citizen participation for climate change. We have to develop this new platform that has to consolidate all climate change related information in one place. We need to articulate studies for means of implementation, because now we are going to have, by the end of next year, a lot of plans. Some of those are working in advance in terms of implementing actions, but others are just starting. So we need to be sure that they get all the elements that they need in terms of implementing that, like this capacity training, we need technologies, we need financing, and that has to be available in order to achieve the goals of every one of these plans. We have the chance to consolidate climate project portfolios. We need to move in this NDC in terms of delivering a more clear investment plan in order to achieve our goals. So we have to develop that, increase access to financing and capturing that. Also, especially at the national level, there is a big gap in terms of being able to develop projects. Like they have ideas, but to write a project, to make the calculations that they need in order to get a financeable project is a great challenge that we are facing. And we need to consolidate all the information related with our carbon markets and the certification related with greenhouse gas reductions. And also with greenhouse gas regulations, we have to develop also standards in terms of greenhouse gas emissions in order to fulfill every mitigation plan action plan. And also, it's important to accelerate climate action, empowering all levels of government and citizenship in terms of developing financeable projects. So that's the main thing. We have a strong framework in order to develop plans, but we need to move all those plans to actions, and that's the main challenge that we are facing now. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Andrés, and congratulations for the work that you and your colleagues and everyone in Chile is doing. We have almost run out of time, but I would like to ask some questions that were sent. One, Andrés, and maybe for Julianne also. Andrés, you mentioned how important science is, and of course I understand that you have the mitigation and the climate scenarios as a basis for planning. How does that work? How are those scenarios built, and what is the relationship with the academia and scientific organizations to make sure that you take into account science for policy and planning?
In terms of vulnerability, we developed a platform that is called ArcClim, that is the Atlas Risk for Climate Adaptation. So we developed that framework in the first push. 100 scientists working that from 23 or maybe I'm misremembering, but 23 different scientific groups. So we developed a platform and we share it, and that, for example, gives information related to the impacts of climate change. And that's a platform that is a lead platform, and every research that we are developing now is feeding this platform that actually now needs a good update, because we are just updating bits, but I think that now it's time to develop and redesign the platform. For example, we are using still the IPCC 2014 models. We need to move to the last one in terms of sharing the information. And also we have a system of national perspective that helps us to get the mitigation and emission scenarios. So we have those two systems working together, and we have developed that with science, and then we support that information in the ministry in order to share with the other public services, and also with other levels of government.
Thank you, Andrés. And Julianne, I think it's really inspiring to see the process in Chile, how climate change is policy is, as Andrés mentioned, a state policy, and it has to be, every action, policy action has to consider this. Since the NDC partnership, you are helping many countries and receiving requests from many other countries for the new NDCs. Are you seeing this trend to compare to the previous NDCs, to make those connections to development planning, to long-term planning, to make sure that this is is supposed to be economy-wide and not only environmental or climate plans? How you see the evolution from the first NDCs to the new ones that are being developed?
Yes, for sure. So as of now, as I mentioned earlier, we had received a lot of requests focused particularly on long-term strategies. We break down the global call support into three broad streams. The first one is preparatory support. The second one is development, update, and ambition enhancement. But the third one is promoting long-term transformation and action. And that's where we see countries that are in that third stage, once they've already prepared those initial NDCs and had that update process, they start to submit requests that are more related to paradigm shifting, awareness raising campaigns, or mainstreaming climate consideration into fiscal and public finance policies, for instance. And we do see that trend, or we do expect it to continue to increase. We've also established a collaboration with the Coalition of Finance Ministers, where we're ensuring that these things are not just relegated to a particular sector of government, but rather are handled in a more integrated way. And the partnership itself requests that we have two different focal points, so not just somebody in climate change, but also somebody in planning or finance, to ensure that this integration is taking place.
Thank you, Julianne. I'm sorry that we don't have more time. This is a great topic and a great, it has been really great to hear from Julianne and from Andrés about the work of the NDC partnership, and also of Chile on planning for the long-term and short-term, and integrating those planning horizons for different development that is sustainable, resilient, and low emission. So thank you very much. We hope that this discussion will continue in the next webinar and in the global workshop. I would like to thank our presenters, Julianne and Andrés, for their valuable contribution to this discussion. Thanks also to everyone who has connected to this webinar. I'm very glad to see people from Europe, from Africa, Asia, from Latin America, from North America. Thank you very much for joining us today. And all the colleagues from the organizing team, the Global Climate Action Partnership, the Clean Energy Solutions Center, for the excellent collaboration to organize this webinar. Thank you very much for joining. You will receive an email with the information of the recording of this session and the presentations. And I just now have to wish you a great day or great evening, wherever you are, and much success in your actions towards a decarbonized and resilient future. Thank you and good day.